Welcome to Community Chat. My name is Kevin Tacci. I will be your host for this segment. This is more or less a legislative version of Community Chat, as we are fortunate enough to have great relationships with our legislative delegation. Joining us today is State Senator John Keenan, who stops by with regularity to kind of chat about some of the things that are going on. Senator, welcome back to Community Chat.
Great to see you.
Just to kind of start off, we're here at the tail end of summer. How's your summer gone?
It's gone by too quickly. You know, we were in session until the end of July, which maybe we can chat about, and then just kind of catching up and then starting planning for the next session. It's been fairly busy, but it has been a bit of a break, which has been nice. I got away a couple weekends with my wife and children, so that was nice.
Probably one of the things that I think you and I have talked about a number of times, whether it's on camera, off camera, for other forms of media, was a revenge porn bill.
Yeah, we were after a few years, we were finally able to get that passed. 48 other states had passed the bill. We had not, for a bunch of different reasons, but we were finally able to get it across the finish line, get it to the governor's desk, and it was signed. And in some ways, we came very close to passing it last session, but in some ways it was just as well that it didn't, because we were able to add some things to it that made it a much better bill. In addition to the revenge porn components, which addresses a really terrible crime. And I just want to thank all those survivors who came forward and offered their testimony in support of the bill. It was incredibly impactful, and we know Alex Hegarty from Abington here was one of those survivors who played a key role in this. And I also want to thank Allison Sullivan, the state rep. She was very helpful. She served on the conference committee on the bill as well. But what we were able to do from last session to this session is add a couple things. One was to expand the definition of abuse to include coercive control. In this day and age with social media and so many other things available, the ability to control somebody is greater than it's ever been. And that truly is a form of abuse. So that's covered in the bill. And then we were also able to put into the bill some provisions about deep fakes, where somebody creates an image or takes an image and alters it so that somebody thinks it's real and puts it out there as being real. And it may show a person nude, partially nude, or engaged in sexual activity just as they would if it was a real photo. And so we included that within the revenge porn. And we were one of the first states to do that. And now Congress is taking a very serious look at what we've done on that. In fact, I know the White House is looking at it as well. We've been in contact with them. They reached out to us, to my office, on that bill and on that part of the bill, particularly the AI component. And I was invited to go down to an executive order signing at the White House relative to AI. So we were able to expand revenge porn to include coercive control and to address the issue of deep fakes as well. And so we went from being one of the last, unfortunately, to address these issues to finally addressing them and taking a big step forward.
Yeah, that's key. And knowing how technology it's grown leaps and bounds as to people being able to copy certain things and be able to pretend that they're someone that they're not is definitely, yes. It's scary.
Yeah, it's tough to really figure out what's real and not. I've seen a few tapes. One I saw of President Biden speaking, and every other word he was swearing. And you looked at it, and it looked so real. And then there was one that somebody did of LeBron James, where he was ripping his coaches and ripping his teammates. And it looked so real, it prompted me to call my sons, who are big basketball fans, and say, I don't think this is real. Is it? And they said, no, but that's out there. It looked like LeBron James was actually saying those things. And so it's going to be really difficult going forward to make sure that we find the right balance on how we regulate all that.
It's interesting because I saw, I believe, a 60-minute piece that talked a little bit about this, and there were different production houses that are able to, and depending on who they're specializing in, they have so many angles and images that they can piece together, whether it's audio, images, video. It's crazy.
It is. Right now there's a kind of this battle on social media about crowd size in terms of the presidential race. And the Trump campaign will put out an image of what they say is their crowd, and then another image of a crowd at a Vice President Harris rally. And the Harris campaign will do the same thing. and you don't know what's real. It's really difficult to figure out which one of them is accurate. And there's some suggestion that neither one is entirely accurate. And so it's going to be difficult for people going forward to figure out what it is we're seeing and is it real.
Something that you had mentioned just a couple of moments ago in regards to the end of the legislative session, which is July 31st, but it's a bit of a marathon this year, which my understanding is that this stretched into August 1st into 9, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, so this this is the second time it's happened. It happened 2 years ago at the end of the formal legislative session then, and it happened again. 2 years ago, we went 24 straight hours. This year, we went 23 straight hours. It is not good government. I was there all night into the morning. I happen to be a night owl, so I'm okay with it. But as my parents said, nothing good happens after midnight. And we left a lot of work undone. We were not able to get to an economic development bill, which is enormously important to the Commonwealth. We weren't able to get to a climate bill, a substance use bill, a plastics bill, a municipal relief bill. We weren't able to pass a supplemental budget that was before us. We weren't able to pass a hospital oversight bill, a long-term care bill. All bills that were teed up, ready to go, and just weren't able to be negotiated at the end because we ran out of time. And we ended up passing a couple in the early morning hours. About 9 a.m. the last day, I went on the Senate floor, stood up on the Senate floor, and just asked, why do we keep doing this? Something has to change. This isn't working. And I pointed out that at the base of it, I believe, there are a few things, but one of them is that the House and Senate just don't get along. In Washington, you hear about Democrats and Republicans. In Massachusetts, it's the House and the Senate. They just don't get along. And then on top of that, and on top of that, so many things are put off to the end. Oh, we can get to it, we can get to it. And when that happens, really good legislation ends up dying. And I had a couple of bills that there was agreement on the House and the Senate side, but they were part of bigger bills, and those bigger bills weren't worked out. And these two items in particular that were agreed upon, solid, good pieces of legislation that would really help people, haven't passed.
Do you want to kind of mention what those two pieces are? Because I would think that you're going to probably do a refile in January.
Yes. Well, I'm hopeful that there's a chance they could pass between now
December, yeah.
and December, but it's difficult and it's complicated to get something passed over the next few months. One of them is recovery coaches. We have a substance use bill one that passed the House, one that passed the Senate, and in the House version, there was provision for recovery coaches, people with lived experience who are in recovery from substance use disorder, who are willing to help others. We want to make sure that there's the proper regulation in place to allow them to be licensed and to provide those services that are so needed. That, again, passed in the House, it passed in the Senate, it was part of the substance use bill. The substance use bill did not pass. So there was a great program that would help people right away. We've got over 2,300 people a year dying of overdoses, and this wasn't going to solve that, but it was a helpful tool, and it hasn't passed. I'm hopeful that we might be able to do it over the next few months. And then also, we had a language in the housing bond bill, healthy homes language, that would allow homeowners, small property owners to address the issues of mold and asbestos and other things that harm adults and children, lead paint. And we had that in the housing bond bill. It was in the House version. We worked on the Senate side to get it in, but the sense was, well, if the House did it, we won't do it, and then we'll negotiate it. Well, the bond bill for housing was negotiated at the last minute, and that fell out. And there's another example of a bill that would have really helped people that didn't get across the finish line just because of everything being left to the last minute.
Can we talk a little bit about that housing bond bill? It seems as though the last two administrations, Bick Polito and now with Maura Healey, there's been a real push to do something in regards to the housing stock shortage that we are experiencing here in the Commonwealth. What's your understanding of this bill? We're talking about $5.16 billion that was signed into law.
It's the largest housing bond bill that we have done. It's $5.1 billion to be spent over the next 5 years, basically to promote the creation of housing of all types, market rate housing, affordable housing, housing for veterans, you name it, broad range of housing. It also makes investments in our housing authorities for those public housing units that are empty so that we can get them online more quickly. There's estimates that there's about 2,000 of them that are out there right now that are awaiting renovation so that they can be put back into use. So there's money for that. There's money to Commonwealth Builders Program, which basically offsets the cost of building in some of the communities. The cost to build is still very expensive, but you can't get the prices for them in some communities. The price that you can get is less than the cost to build. So Commonwealth Builders provides some incentive for that, for some kind of moderate income housing. There was also a language provision in there, not financial, that allows accessory dwelling units as of right now in single family residential districts. And this is statewide. So people will be able to, if they choose, basically construct an accessory dwelling unit on their property without having to go through an extensive permitting process. There are some guidelines in place. They can't be any bigger than 900 square feet. They have to have a separate entrance. They have to meet some minimum dimensional requirements based on what the community's zoning standards are. The community can't require any more than one parking space. The community has the right to restrict them so that they don't become Airbnbs, but they cannot restrict them to require that they be occupied by family members, for instance. There's some communities that have had these ordinances in place. They've had some success. This is now going to be authorized statewide, so we'll see how it works out. We have to do as much as we can to create housing. Massachusetts has a severe housing shortage. And just a quick example of tying in the economic development bill, which didn't pass, which had a lot of money in there for life sciences and bio and things like that. I was talking to a couple at an event in Quincy this weekend. They had gone from New Orleans to Michigan to Ann Arbor for graduate school, and then came to Massachusetts. And I asked, why Massachusetts? They said, well, this is where the life sciences, the pharmaceutical industry is really located. This is the hub of all of that. And yet they were concerned about the cost of housing. They knew they have to be here to work in this profession, but they're concerned about the cost of housing and the availability of housing. And that runs across every profession, whether you can make enough money to afford to live here. And the housing prices are approaching $1 million, and to afford a home in Massachusetts, family income has to be well over $200,000 now, an annual basis. So it's getting really difficult. We have to build more housing, but we have to do it in a smart way as well.
In regards to the Maura Healey, Kim Driscoll administration, do you feel that they're done as far as putting forth legislation or initiatives to be able to jumpstart housing, building more homes and offering incentives?
I hope they're not done because there's projections that we need upward of 200,000 homes built over the course of roughly the next 10 years. This will hopefully build somewhere between 40, 50, 60,000 homes range, but we've got to do more to spur the private development, private construction of homes. This does do that, but I think there needs to be continued commitment. We have to look at zoning regulations throughout the Commonwealth. The MBTA Communities Act was a big step in that direction, but there's still some things that need to be addressed in terms of making sure that we create areas within communities, again, by way of smart thinking and zoning, but that those areas should allow housing of all types, whether it's single-family condominiums or multifamily. Every community has a role to play.
I'm going to go from talking about homes to quality of life, especially when it comes to our health. Past few weeks, we've been hearing about Stewart Health, what's going to happen with the hospitals. Are they going to sell off their properties? And this is also happening during a time where Brockton Hospital is reopening after a year ago having that 10-alarm fire. Talk to me about as far as the medical situation in the Stewart crisis.
You'd think in Massachusetts, with all the resources we have and with all the hospitals that we have, all the medical schools that we have, we really are recognized across the world for providing some of the best healthcare and cutting-edge healthcare. We are struggling right now in terms of our ability to provide healthcare at the local level. We have seen the Stewart Hospital situation just blow up, which is frustrating. The CEO of that company came in and promised all kinds of things to all kinds of communities in terms of improving healthcare accessibility. In Quincy, for instance, Stewart brought Quincy Medical Center and didn't deliver at all on the promises there. And so we find ourselves where they're in financial difficulty. The state is in a position now where they have negotiated it so that several of those hospitals will be purchased and run in much the same areas what they have been. There's some concern over local Lee County Hospital, whether that will be open in some form or another. And there's really a cascading effect when one closes. I was at South Shore Hospital not that long ago taking a tour of the emergency department and meeting with the CEO and his leadership team. They're in a tough spot. They are providing outstanding care, but if this doesn't work and another one of these hospitals, whether it be Good Sam or another one of the Stewart Hospital closes, South Shore is in a really difficult position in terms of meeting the demand. They struggled to meet the demand when Brockton closed, but they miraculously did, and they're really concerned what's next. And so even though the county may be north of Quincy on the edge of Boston and the Quincy-Milton-Boston line, if that doesn't open, that has an impact on where people go, and that will impact BI Deaconess in Milton, which is on the edge of my district. It will impact South Shore Health Services, which is my district kind of wraps around it. It will impact Good Sam and where people in this area in Abington get their care. So it really has a cascading effect. I'm hopeful that we have kind of stopped or put the brakes on a deteriorating situation, but there's so much more work that has to be done. Again, you think in Massachusetts, we should be the model for the delivery of healthcare, and we're really struggling right now. And it doesn't help when you see the CEO at the Olympics and cruising around in his two multi-$100 million yachts. It really is disheartening. And so we're taking a good look at it in terms of the role of private equity. We had a hospital oversight bill that didn't make it through the process at the end of the session, unfortunately. We will revisit that. We had a long-term care bill. Some of the things that happened in acute care hospitals, private equity investment, hedge fund investment, is happening in long-term care facilities. And so we're starting to take a good look at that. When the long-term care bill passed the Senate, again, it didn't get to the governor's desk. I put some amendments in. One was adopted that has us take a real good look at the role of private equity in the purchase and management of our long-term care facilities, our rehab facilities, our nursing homes that people utilize. I'm fearful that private equity will go in there, try to squeeze money out of them, and then we'll find ourselves in a situation 4 or 5 years from now similar to what we're experiencing with the hospitals.
It's interesting that we're seeing this take place, knowing that it was several years ago that there was a flip from hospitals being nonprofit to becoming for-profit.
Right.
I don't know if that was the seed that was planted that is harvesting what we're seeing now with the problems with Stewart Health.
I think it is. You had the private equity going in. They purchased these hospitals, and then they sold off the land. And so the hospital's sitting on land that it doesn't own, and so the hospital is basically captive to the landowner and has to pay whatever rent the landowner demands. And that was a big issue. And things like that shouldn't be allowed, not when it comes to people's health care.
Let's talk about our veterans. A big piece of legislation that passed, the HERO Act.
Yeah, still to see that pass. That's been in the works for a little while. We try to do something each session to assist our veterans, and the HERO Act was this year's version of doing that. What we have tried to do, and again this is a continuation, is to make it as easy as possible for those who are returning from active duty, who are coming home as veterans, that they can get back into civilian life, not only themselves in terms of employment opportunities, but their families as well. Things relative to licensing, making sure that they can get through the licensing process if they have a particular skill or trade, some educational advantages. In this bill, we've also, I was thrilled to see an increase in the Gold Star annuity, an annuity that's provided for Gold Star parents, Gold Star spouses. A gentleman that I worked with for many years in Quincy, Larry Norton, asked me to file this bill when I got to the legislature. So each year we filed the bill. And then in the last 2 sessions, Senator John Keenan, who is a veteran, also filed the bill. And we were thrilled to see that increase in the annuity included in the HERO Act. And every time I review a summary of the HERO Act or hear about it. Larry Norton comes to mind. He's since passed away, but he was such a huge advocate for making sure that Gold Star families got what they deserved, and it's not a whole lot, but it's more than they were getting.
Let's talk about as far as securing funding for the district. I know one of the things that a lot of legislators hang their hat on is what they're able to bring back to the district for the communities they serve. Any success in regards to bringing anything back to Abington and the other neighboring communities that you represent?
Sure. So our budget process is, one of the first things in the budget process is you figure out what revenue is going to be available. And then we begin basically hounding the chairs of the Ways and Means Committee with our priorities. And I think I speak for most legislators, the number one priority is local aid. That's money that's used by the community for education and other things. Chapter 70 is the education part of local aid. In Abington, we'll get about $300,000 more this year than last year for Chapter 70 funding, specifically for schools. So that's going to be about $14.5 million. And then there's a pool of money called UGR, Unrestricted General Government Aid. And in Abington, that's about $2.42 million, and that's up about $70,000 from last year. So early in the process, we start hounding on that. Let's make sure that we can commit as much as possible to local aid. And we were able to do that this year, despite some pretty challenging fiscal situations. And then we also have the opportunity to address some local priorities. And in Abington, we were able to get some funding for the police department for some equipment. We were able to get funding for the design and permitting of a youth outdoor recreational area. And then also some money for the Council on Aging, and then some sidewalk infrastructure work. And we work as a team on that. Representative Sullivan works to get things in the House budget. I work to get them in the Senate budget, with the idea that combined they will give some money to the local priorities.
So now that the
Sullivan L Media, I'm sorry.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
No. That's the idea of having this conversation with you, is to inform folks as to some of the things that are going on and better understand what their elected officials are doing to better represent the district. And you do a fantastic job when we sit down and we talk about this stuff. Now that the formal legislative session is there's still informals going on. Do your committees still meet, and do you have any updates on any of the committees that you serve on?
It depends whether there are late bills filed. We just had a hearing, not an in-person hearing, but we did it by basically people could write in and give testimony on a bill. It was a local bill that had to do with elections, and it was assigned to the Elections Committee. So yes, as bills come in, we still have committee hearings on them. And there are several conference committees that are still meeting to work out the bills I talked about: economic development, climate, substance use, plastics, all those types of things. They're still meeting, and so there's still a fair amount of activity. In informal sessions, let's say that the Economic Development Conference Committee comes back with an agreement and presents it to the House and Senate. Under the rules, we do not have the opportunity to amend that. And under normal circumstances, you would have a presentation and then a roll call vote on it, and a majority vote would be required to pass it, depending whether it's also a bonding bill. In an informal session, because you don't have that opportunity for a roll call, one member can stand up and object to the bill, and that means it's put off for that session. You could take it up 2 days later, but if the person shows up and objects, that bill was not acted upon. And so it gives enormous power to any one individual, whether it be a member of the House or a member of the Senate, in terms of stalling, killing, or making sure that legislation doesn't pass. And so it's difficult to maneuver through that with some of these bigger bills, but that effort's underway.
What remains for the rest of this? And you got a little more than 4 months left in the session. What are some of the things that you see coming down the road?
Well, and in our office, I know we're getting ready for next session. We've paid a fair amount of attention to the issue of sports betting, online sports betting, and betting in general. And for instance, that new program, sports betting, prompted the state lottery to request an online component. It was in the House version of the budget. It was in the governor's version of the budget. It was in the House version of the budget. It wasn't in the Senate version of the budget. But I was concerned that it would end up in conference committee and might come out of conference committee and go to the governor's desk. And in fact, it did. So I had offered amendments on the Senate side, even though technically it wasn't before us. And those amendments didn't pass because that part of the bill wasn't before us. But as it was in conference committee, I was able to provide to the conference committee some pretty detailed language about what we'd like to see in the online lottery program. And one of them, for instance, was that you can't bet online unless you're 21 years old. As originally proposed, was 18. So you can have high school kids betting on the lottery online at lunchtime and elsewhere. So if you can only bet sports betting age 21, then you have to be 21 to do online lottery betting. And we put in some advertising restrictions and things like that. And ultimately, those made it into the final version of the bill. I say that as a kind of context for our work going forward in August to September. We continue to focus on sports betting. We had a meeting just last week that was quite revealing, incredibly eye-opening as to where this industry is going and what they're doing with the data they have and who they're targeting. It's absolutely incredible and quite concerning. And the next iteration of this is going to be online casino gambling. Sports betting, it depends on the outcome of a game. Who's going to win, who's going to score points. We're trying to address all the dangerous components of that, the addictive components of that. Online sports betting, the house basically controls the odds. And they have just so much more control over it. So online casino gambling is something that we're really concerned about. And so we're going to continue our efforts through the fall in getting comprehensive legislation ready to be filed in January of next session.
So you've sat in on your share of conference committees, right? Just as a person who's had to be a part of those, what is it like when you're sitting across this? You're with two colleagues in the Senate, and there's three members of the House. What are those like? What are the conversations like, and what is the process like to finally meet in the middle somehow and be able to put something that's going to go out to a vote and maybe get signed by the governor?
It all depends.
Okay.
In some conference committees, there is this trading of papers where the Senate has a whole list of priorities and the House has a whole list of priorities. And the Senate will recede on this, the House will grant on that, Senate will grant on this, the House will recede on that. And there's just trading of papers oftentimes, and there's a real digging in when it comes to positions on certain of them. It's all about kind of keeping score. Well, we can't have a bill where the Senate has 14 of their priorities and the House has 8, or the House has 16 and the Senate has 9. That drives me absolutely crazy. The conference committees that I've been on, I've been able to establish a relationship with I've been chair one a while ago on compounding, most recently on revenge pornography bill. That kind of starts, and then it's kind of, okay, can we chat? And let's just get to the bill. Let's go through it, and let's just find out where we're in agreement, agree to that, and then work out where we're not. And I've been very fortunate in both cases where that whole keeping score and tallying things hasn't been an issue. I worked with former Ways and Means Chair in the House, Jeff Sanchez, on a compounding bill, and it really was one of those things, hey, let's just get to it. Let's just sit down and figure it out and not keep score. And same thing in the revenge porn. Rep Day, Chair Day, was the same thing. They staked their position, we staked ours, and then it was kind of let's just make it a better bill. And that's ultimately what we did. Unfortunately, that's not the tone in some other conference committees, and I don't think that's honestly the tone that's set at the leadership level. It's very competitive, and my feeling is let's just work it out. Let's just get it to the governor's desk. Nobody cares whether it's House priorities or Senate priorities. All they want to know is it a good bill that's going to help them. And that's been the way I've looked at it, and I've been very fortunate to work with people from the House that have the same approach.
Well, thank you for taking a moment and pulling back the curtain and kind of giving us a little bit of insight as to what happens when it comes to trying to, put together a bill at the final hours where you're trying to take the House and the Senate are trying to make sure that the best provisions are in before it's voted on and then ultimately signed, or maybe not.
Yeah. And they're all done behind closed doors, which is kind of an issue that I think people are starting to consider maybe opening up a little bit. And then you value the contributions of each of the members. My Senate colleagues were really helpful on the Senate side in terms of providing guidance and insight. And I know, I mentioned Rep. Sullivan Almeida, she was incredibly helpful. She brought a very unique perspective to the bill. And so all of those perspectives come together, and if you're not concerned about who gets credit, whether it's House or Senate, and you just want to do a good bill, then those things ultimately are what matter.
Anything that we haven't touched upon, but you want to take a moment to mention, or just maybe if folks want to reach out to your office regarding constituent services, or just find out more about how,
Sure.
state government works?
Absolutely. They can give us a holler at 617-722-1494, or they can go and send us an email at john.keenan@masenate.gov. They can visit our website as well. When they call the office, we always have somebody there, although, as I mentioned yesterday, the State House was closed for mechanical issues. But there's already somebody there, and I take great pride in getting back to people. And I have to say that I have a great team in place. The Constituent Service District Director, everybody in the office, my Chief of Staff, the Legislative Director, Legislative Aide, and the Communications, just a great team, and they really are committed to helping people. And so I urge people to call us, and we continue to have great working relationships with local officials. We're working with the Select Board now and the Town Manager, Scott, on the issue of the MBTA commuter rail crossings and the gates. There's been some issues with that all summer, and striping. That's been an issue in Abington for quite some time, and most recently there's been some malfunctioning of the gates. And as a result of the communications, and the town has done a really great job on making sure that they're reaching out to the MBTA directly as well. There'll be some work done on the weekend of August 23rd on Center Street that hopefully will start to address or resolve these issues. It has to do with ballast and perhaps water leakage, and then a default as a result of the water getting into it. But it's, I guess the good thing is, the default is that the arm stays down. But the bad thing is it does create some pretty significant traffic issues in town, and then people get impatient and you worry about what happens then. So we continue to work on that with the town officials, with the MBTA, with Keolis. We were successful last year in getting a lot of the striping done. We're constantly on that to make sure that that's updated as much as possible. So town does some really good things, and it's a great leadership team that's in place, and love working with them.
Senator, we want to thank you for joining us here today, and kind of just, as you do on a regular basis, stop on by and bring us up to speed as to some of the things that are happening at the State House, and that the district is going to benefit one way or the other.
Great.
You got it.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
You got it. We want to thank you for tuning into a show like Community Chat. Any questions, you always can send them to info@abington.tv. And until our next conversation, have yourself a great day.